The 1962 MVP race is one of the most competitive and iconic of all time. Bill Russell ultimately won the award and did so amongst some all-time seasons from some all-time players. This race's outcome is deemed by some as a robbery. You have Wilt's 50-point per game regular season, you have Oscar's triple-double regular season, and some other insane MVP cases made by players like Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, Bob Pettit, and more, all all-time greats. This MVP race has sparked intense debates among fans and analysts alike even today. Now, I want you guys to comment below, who do you think deserved the 1962 NBA MVP? The early 1960s were a transformative time for the NBA for a variety of reasons. We got the budding Celtics dynasty out east, and a lot of legendary talent is entering the league around this time, or entering its prime. All of this coincides with this incredible scoring boom for the league. The NBA was struggling throughout the 1950s, and in just 6 short seasons between 1957 and 1962, scoring jumps nearly 20 points per game. At that time, the entire philosophy of the game was different. They weren't running very complex offenses, so the idea was to get as many chances at the basket because more chances equals more makes, and that equals more points. When the 24-second shot clock was introduced in the mid-1950s, 1962 was the height of that, in that it represented just about as fast as you could play without players breaking down, and that kind of started to happen in subsequent seasons anyways. They quickly got there after the shot clock was instituted in the mid-1950s, but they soon realized that running down the court was extremely tiring and would also haunt players' bodies for years down the road. And as they realized this, coaches start to focus more on actually running plays to get good shots as opposed to just a sheer number of shots in general. And this shows in some of the insane numbers of this era, and specifically in these MVP cases. Players took and missed a lot of shots, hence the big numbers and odd efficiency compared to today's league. A couple things to remember before we dive into this further. In 1962, the media didn't vote for the MVP. It was actually decided upon by the players and their peers. Also, only 3 players could be submitted on an MVP ballot as opposed to 5 today. So 1962, the MVP voting ballot goes as follows. Russell, of course, wins. He's followed in second place by Wilt Chamberlain, then Oscar Robertson. Elgin Baylor finishes 4th, and he's followed by Jerry West, Bob Pettit, Richie Guerin, and then Bob Cousy. Let's look at some of the main contenders' cases before looking at Bill. Perhaps the most eye-popping campaign belongs to Wilt. He averaged an NBA 2K-esque stat line of 50.4 points per game, 25.7 rebounds, and shot over 50% from the field, including his 100-point game versus the Knicks. He did this while taking 3,159 field goal attempts that year, by far the NBA record. Fun fact, Wilt actually owns 5 of the 6th highest volume field goal attempt seasons in NBA history. And specifically in 1962, he did all of this while averaging 48.5 minutes per game. Yeah, that's right. Wilt played more than the length of an entire NBA game on average. The Warriors played in 10 overtime games in 1962, and 2 of those went to multiple overtime periods. He would help the Warriors to a 49-31 record as he was flanked by all-star teammates Paul Risen and Tom Gola. Now, these stats obviously look insane by today's standards, and they definitely still are. The 1962 season, again, is renowned for these insane numbers. Considering Wilt, at the time, only finished with 9 first-place votes, it's safe to say that his peers weren't necessarily impressed with his outrageous statistical season. Again, this is the year in which he scored 100 points against the Knicks, and reports indicate that a lot of New York players were outraged by that game, unhappy with how he appeared to hog the ball and how the Warriors would foul near the end of the game in order to inflate Wilt's touches. You know, you may wonder why he didn't win, but it's safe to say that he might not have gotten a lot of votes from the New York Knicks players. Oscar finished 3rd in voting off the back of the league's first triple-double season. Oscar, in just his 2nd pro year, had a final stat line of 30.8 points, 12.5 rebounds, and 11.4 assists. The era's style, as for a lot of these players, definitely catered nicely to Oscar's game. And even accounting for the era's statistical insanity, he had an incredible year by today's standards and was efficient as well. He shot 48% from the field and had a true shooting percentage of 55.4, which was 16% higher than the league average true shooting percentage. He did this all while playing 45 minutes a night for 79 games. He led the Royals to the #1 offense in the league and finished with an offensive rating that was 4.7 points above the league average. Now, the Royals were pretty abysmal defensively and finished just 43-37, so perhaps that hurts his case. But what's astounding is that Oscar finishes third in voting despite receiving 4 more first-place votes than Wilt. He only finished behind Wilt because Wilt received significantly more second-place votes. And though Oscar didn't take home the hardware in 1962, he'd have much better seasons down the road and even grabbed an MVP a couple of years later in 1964. While we all know about the crazy seasons of Wilt and Oscar, Elgin, who finished 4th, had a year that completely slides by unnoticed. What was crazy is that Elgin didn't practice this year. Elgin was a U.S. Army reservist at the time. He worked in the state of Washington during the week where he lived in Army barracks and only left when he was given a weekend pass. And even on those occasions where he could leave, he still had to fly coach with multiple connections in order to link up with the Lakers wherever they were playing that night and then get back to Washington by Monday. That's what Baylor did for the entire season. So, question is, how did Baylor do in his limited games? Well, Elgin averages a career-high 38.3 points per game on slightly above league average efficiency, and he also threw in 18.6 rebounds and 4.6 assists. The reason he ultimately falls in the voting is because he only played in 48 of the 82 games due to his situation, though the Lakers do go 37-11 when he plays, which is roughly a 63-win pace over an 82-game regular season. Plus, LA was just 17-15, 2 games above 500 when he was out. Elgin would show that he truly was a deserving MVP candidate when he put up the same numbers in the postseason, as the Lakers got 1 win away from beating the Russell Celtics in the finals. Those 1962 finals, by the way, also being the series in which Elgin scored the record-setting 61 points in a Game 5 victory. These were the 3 main finalists outside of Bill Russell in 1962, though there were a few other commendable seasons. Jerry averaged 38-5 for the Lakers and filled in when Elgin was out, but as noted, the Lakers were simply better when Elgin was there, and players likely docked Jerry for having Baylor on his team. Bob Pettit averaged 31-19, but did so for a 29-win Hawks team that was not good. And same case for Richie Guerin. Great numbers, but for a bad Knicks team. So, ultimately, why did Bill Russell win the MVP? Well, to be frank, Russ, with already 2 MVPs in his pocket, peaked this year statistically for a Celtics team that won 60 games and anchored an all-time defense. The Celtics that year had a relative defensive rating of -8.5. And Bill, at age 27, in the middle of his prime, averaged 18.9 points, 23.6 rebounds, and 4.5 assists. Although Russell never had gaudy scoring numbers, contemporaries always highlighted how his high-level team passing played just as big of a role in his portability as did his defense. Russell in 1962 was simply at the peak of his game in 4 categories: his passing, his shot blocking, his speed in the open floor, and his ability to even run the break like a guard at times. If you wanted to make a statistical MVP case for Russ, it's understandable why some may look at his numbers and scratch their head. The tape, however, shows a player whose impact goes well beyond that, swallowing up slashing guards trying to penetrate and get to the rim, while also being one of the best second jumpers in league history. Ultimately, regardless of what your argument is, contemporaries voted on the award, and Russell was beloved by all, especially his teammates, and he was far and away regarded as the best leader in the league. So, he takes home the hardware in 1962. He's got the strong case, but so did the other finalists. So you guys tell me below, who do you think should have won the 1962 NBA MVP, and why? Also, let us know what else you'd like to see covered.